morning, Alabama. Welcome to Tom York's Morning Show with your hosts, Colleen Bates and Tom York, plus news headlines with Bill Boland.
Hi, my name is Brooke Burton. Here's the morning show. Take it away, Tom.
Thank you, Brooke Burton. Nice to have you with us, and thank you for introducing our show this morning. This is Tuesday, January the 15th. Today is the birthday anniversary of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. In 1983, Congress passed a law making his birthday a national holiday. A major focal point of the civil rights struggle happened right here in Birmingham during the 60s. Massive changes have taken place since then, since those troubled times. So on our morning show forum today, we'll open the phone lines to hear what you have to say about life then and life today in the city of Birmingham and the state of Alabama. And today we make our final visit to the new downtown YMCA. We'll be talking to Dennis McCree, Physical and Sports Director for the new facility, and show you what happens in the Nautilus room.
There are certain dictates of business dressing, but just because your profession indicates a conservative approach to grooming, it doesn't mean you have to sacrifice style. Our hair experts today will show us how the businessman can be well groomed and stylish within his conservative limits. Tom?
Also, there will be a series on educational programs presented by the public library. Alabama Impact, with programs focusing on the achievements of Dr. King and the civil rights movement in Birmingham. And today we'll talk to a representative about those programs. And later in the program, Bill Boland will have the latest news headlines and the weather forecast. Now, on our morning forum, a matter of serious history. Many of today's young people only know of the civil and human rights struggles during the turbulent 60s throughout, well, and through the history books. But a great number of people lived through it and remember how things were. It was an almost totally segregated society in stores and restaurants and movie houses, schools, public restrooms, even drinking fountains in public places, an untenable situation for blacks. It began to change in 1955 when Rosa Parks of Montgomery would not give up her seat on the bus. Then the most famous name in the civil rights movement began to get the attention of some people in the country. It was Martin Luther King, Jr., the pastor of a Montgomery church. Much of the rest is violent history. The Selma March, the church bombing in Birmingham, the many protest marches, and the constant atmosphere of fear in the community. In the forefront of much of the activity was Dr. King. In 1964, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. And in 1968, he was assassinated in Memphis. In 1983, the Congress of the United States passed a law making his birthday a national holiday. The first such day will be officially celebrated next January the 20th. Meanwhile, there will be many activities this year. In a moment, we'll talk to a man who was on the scene, one who went on to become the city's chief executive and who continues in the public service, former Mayor David Vann. We'll be joined by Joe Roy of the Birmingham Public Library. We'll meet them in just a moment. Now this. We have some guests this morning. We're going to do a little reminiscing, look at some pictures, and talk about things as they were and things as they are today. Joe Roy is here from the Birmingham Public Library, and we have some pictures, I believe, from Spider Martin's coverage of all of the activities around Selma and Birmingham. And former Mayor David Vann is joining us this morning to do a little reminiscing and talk about the public series downtown. Let me welcome both of you to the morning show.
Thank you.
Nice to have you with us. Nice to have you with us. David, you were mayor. What years were you mayor?
75 to 79.
75, 79. Okay. We were just getting uncovered coming out from the mid-60s about that time, and much of it was at your direction. Where were you when in the 60s?
Well, in the early 60s, I was practicing law in Birmingham. I was active in Democratic politics. I was the organization chairman for John F. Kennedy for president in 1960, and chairman of a group called the Democratic Campaign Committee. And in 61, when the Freedom Riders came, up to that point, we'd had a lot of stories written about Birmingham and its racial segregation.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But when the Freedom Riders came and Commissioner Connor withdrew police protection or refused to provide police protection, and people were beaten up in the Trailway bus station.
In the bus station, yes.
The people who were there were our local newsmen. Clancy Lake, television newsman,
right,
was beaten. Tom Langford from the Birmingham Post-Herald, who took photographs. He was a photographer, still a photographer. His camera was taken away and opened up and film exposed. Some of the people that were beaten had nothing to do with the Freedom Riders. They'd just come to meet a bus.
Yes.
You know? The local newspapers ran that picture front page, both of them with front page editorials saying, "Where were the police? We cannot let things like this happen in our city." That picture ran around the world on newspapers. A group of Birmingham businessmen were in Tokyo, Japan. That picture ran front page Tokyo.
Yes.
And those businessmen decided something had to change in Birmingham. And one of the men was Sidney Smyer, the incoming president of the Chamber of Commerce. When he got back to Birmingham, he organized a committee called the Senior Citizens Committee. It was a low-key committee, but it was made up of the presidents of practically every major company in Birmingham, senior partners from major law firms, and they decided to try to make changes in Birmingham. The first thing they did was got the Bar Association to make a study of local government, to make a recommendation as to what form of government would be best.
Would you say this is the catalyst that began the major changes in this town?
Yes, it was a catalyst.
The formation of that committee? It
was a catalyst because it was, at that point, Birmingham began to take charge of its own problems.
Mm-hmm.
And in '62, we had a petition campaign, which we got up on 10 days' notice. 12,000 people signed our petition on a single day to get an election to change the form of government.
That's right. It's gone from the commissioner form of government to the mayor and council.
To give broader participation in city government. We won that election in November of '62. And then Bull Connor ran for mayor. And Albert Boutwell ran for mayor. The people of the city chose Boutwell. The new government was being sworn in April of '63. And the old government said, "Well, wait a minute, we're not leaving. We were elected for 4 years." And, well, literally, there were two mayors. If you want to see the mayor, they say, "Which one?" And one was in one corner and one was in the other. The commission met at 9, the council met at 10, both purporting to be the government of the city. The new government had to sue the old government to find out which was the government of the city. Well, at that same time, Dr. King announced his demonstrations. So the Birmingham demonstrations occurred at a point when we had a hiatus in city government. No one knew who the government was.
Okay.
And King and his strategist really carried out probably what was one of the most skillful public relations campaigns for an issue that we'll ever see either before or since.
It was very timely. That's absolutely certain.
Well, if you remember, your television news in those days was 30 minutes. There was 15 minutes national,
that's right.
15 minutes local. They could march. They would meet at the
Well, we had 5 minutes local news, and 5 of that was sports, and 5 of it was weather.
Okay, so all right.
That's right. We had 5 minutes of news.
But the national news was 15 minutes.
Yes, that's right.
Well, they would meet at the 16th Street Baptist Church, and King would speak, and he was a very eloquent speaker, and he would have all of his audience on their feet and ready to come the next day and march. Then they would leave the church and they would march up 6th Avenue on the sidewalk. They rarely got past 17th Street because they would be stopped by the Birmingham police. And there never was a confrontation of black and white except the demonstrators and the police and then later the firemen.
Okay.
But in that one block of walking, they could make enough film to take over the 15-minute national newscast, and they did.
Yeah. Well, we have some films that's going to be shown in a series of lectures and programs at the Birmingham Public Library. I'm going to show you those in just a moment now, following this break. We'll be back. About the city of Birmingham and the state of Alabama during the turbulent 60s. And our other guest, well, we were talking about what you heard just a moment ago from former Mayor David Vann was the gist of his talk, which will be at the Public Library on the 17th, on Thursday, called the Birmingham Settlement. Now, Jo Roy is here from the Birmingham Public Library in charge of the programs there, and she's going to tell us about the other. We've missed Monday and Tuesday, right? So let's go to Wednesday now. What do we have coming? Well, today. Let's go for Tuesday.
Okay. This is a gallery lecture series, and in the gallery are photographs taken by Spider Martin of the Selma to Montgomery March of 1965. And today at noon in the gallery we have Odessa Woolfolk. She's going to speak on the struggle for justice, women in the movement. She is now the director of the Center for Urban Affairs at UAB. She's also on the National Commission for the Study of Civil Rights in Alabama. We're particularly excited about that. We're also excited about the show and all of the lectures. We hope with this is education programs. We really think that the city needs to study itself a good bit more, and through the library we can do this effectively.
All right, let's take a look at some of these pictures now. This is the Spider Martin gallery that will be on display there. This goes what, down to Selma?
This is the March in Selma.
And this, what was the date of this?
In 1965, the entire gallery goes over, the show spans a period of a year, so it's difficult to identify each photograph.
All right, then this was 4 years after the thing that David was talking about just a moment ago.
This is the beginning of the march, as you see Dr. Martin Luther King there.
All right.
This is one of the many, as David alluded to, many church speeches. Okay, this is in front of the Beulah Baptist Church.
That's in Montgomery. Right. And this is the confrontation on the Pettus Bridge?
Yes, it is. Okay, this is at the courthouse, and as you can see, not everyone agreed with the peace protest of Dr. King.
To take all these pictures that David was talking about a moment ago, a lot of newsmen, photographers got beaten up and their cameras taken away. So Spider was not without some danger to his personal self.
No, he wasn't. And some of the photographs that you'll see in the show are people actually coming at the camera. And you wonder how long he stayed there when he began to run.
Of course, I know Spider, and you know, he's not afraid of anything with shoulders. Maybe a water moccasin he's afraid of, but that's all.
This again is on the Pettus Bridge, or just over the Pettus Bridge when the confrontation began. This is Dr. King on the steps of Capitol, and it's interesting to note that 100 years before, this is where Jefferson Davis was inaugurated.
Yeah. Those are some of the pictures you'll see in the gallery down at the public library. What are the hours that this will be open? Basically
9 to 6. There are a few nights, Monday through Thursday, that the library is open until 8. And the show will be up until the 14th.
Well, let's take them through the rest of it. Tomorrow at noon to 12:30 will be Judge U.W. Clemon talking about the student involvement.
He was a student at
He was
Miles
a student,
College
that's right, at Miles College at the time.
He organized the students in the protest.
And Dr. John Nixon, who will be talking, will be giving a dramatic reading about the I Have a Dream speech of Dr. King, which has probably become the most famous of all.
It has, and with this we have Dorothy Porter, and she is singing some freedom songs, and it's really particularly exciting.
All right, David, we're going to open the phone lines in a few minutes, but we're going to talk, how do you think this city has changed dramatically in the last, say, 10 years?
Well, I think an awful lot came out of that period. Being no government, the business community had to come together and deal with the problem, and the actual racial...
Where were they before? Where were they?
Well, they basically had supported the commission government. They'd been going about their business. Things were peaceful, but all of a sudden, things weren't peaceful anymore. And to restore peace so business could proceed
was U.S.
required
Steel
some
still
changes.
running this town then?
Well, they were still influential, but I think we were at the point where a lot of local companies were beginning to take more independent views. You go back to '47 when they had the effort to vote a consolidation of the local governments, and U.S. Steel put the pressure on. They did not want it.
Yeah.
And you have ads signed by the president of every bank urging people to vote against the consolidation. All the labor unions.
Because they had U.S. Steel money in the bank.
Yeah. But you know, Vulcan Materials was coming up. You had Liberty National had become a more significant company, and you can go down the list of a lot of local companies. And I remember I was at a meeting where the settlement was discussed, and we had all the business leadership of Birmingham virtually there. And you stop to think about it, businessmen don't like to deal with controversy.
No.
They prefer to support political leaders that try to deal with the controversy, but stay in the background. But this was a time when they had to come forward because there was no government, and probably you have a hard time finding any American city where the business leadership of a community stood prouder or taller than the people of Birmingham did. And it brought together, it didn't matter whether people were liberal or conservative or where they stood politically on things of a national sort. These were people dedicated to preserving this city, and people buried their differences and worked together in a way that I think historians will treat as very significant. And that degree of cooperation continues to this day. Every Monday morning we still have breakfasts where all of these elements sit down around a table and talk about problems to keep problems from coming up again.
Okay, we're going to open our telephone lines in just a moment. Maybe we're going to find out what you think. 741-7474 is the number to call in our morning forum, and we'll be back in a moment following this.
Racial progress or failure? Morning Forum asks you next.
Morning Forum, what do you think? We have as our guest this morning Joe Roy from the Public Library. Former Mayor David Vann is with us. How have things changed for you since the 60s? How have things changed for the city of Birmingham and the state of Alabama? What are the opportunities here? We have a couple callers on the line now. Racial issues, have we overcome? 741-7474. Let's take the first caller. You're on the air. What's your comment? Hello. Hello, anybody? That person was not there. All right, now we have another caller on the line. Let's try that one. You're on the air. What's your comment?
Yes, Tom, I would like to say I was in the 5th grade, and I believe I was 9 years old at the time all this was going on. And it was very confusing to the children of school age that time. And I'm sure Dr. King and all our city officials and everybody did a lot to bring peace within each other in that time. But I think the main learning to live with each other, that came from my generation, because we went to school with each other and we didn't care what color each other were. You know, a lot of people did, but I didn't, and I know a few of my friends didn't. And
what were your mom and daddy telling you at that time?
Well, now my mother and daddy are Christian people, and they try to love everyone.
Okay. All right, that's fine. That's a good comment. That's pretty generalized, I would say. There were a lot of people of goodwill who stood by and did nothing.
Well, I think you got to remember that you're dealing with a very difficult issue. You're dealing with opinions that were formed under the leadership of school teachers, newspapers, ministers, churches. The Supreme Court of the United States said segregation was legal. You're asking for a tremendous change of opinion, far more drastic than anything that's ever happened in the history of this country, probably.
We have another caller on the line. You're on the air. What is your comment, please? Good morning.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, in certain school situations, I think that the racist things haven't changed. And dealing with Huffman High School, one incident that hadn't changed at all, about a coach striking a student with a pom-pom stick.
Okay, I don't know whether you're talking about an isolated incident or not, but it certainly sounds like that to me. You think this is representative of the situation that still exists today?
Yes.
You think it is? Okay. Well, I think a lot of folks probably would disagree. David, what do you think? Is that a situation like that still exist?
Well, I think this, I say this is the most difficult question you deal with in the public affairs, and I think there are still people with strong feelings. But I do think that no matter how strong people's feelings are today, people have shifted over a great deal in the sense of fairness in this country. When we say the Pledge of Allegiance and say justice for all,
we really mean it now.
It has a new meaning that it did not have before this.
All right. Another caller's on the line. You're on the air. What is your comment, please?
Yes, sir. I really think that things haven't changed that much. Mayor Arrington is using Bull Connor tactics in denying parade permits for those who wish to peacefully parade in a symbolic place, just as the bus station was a symbolic place where there should have been police protection, and they should have been allowed to express their dismay with the situation.
What are you talking about, this anti-abortion march?
Pro-life movement, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for your comment. She says it hadn't changed very much, says it just turned around, and now it is black oppression instead of white oppression.
No, I think she's talking about the march, the argument about where the marchers should be able to march. The city has said, we'll let you march here, but not there. I had the same problem with Nita Carter. We had people, we had a group of communists that wanted to march right in the middle of the place where it happened. And I wouldn't let them march there. I'd let them march somewhere else, but I wouldn't let them march there. I let them march downtown.
Now, they would call that oppression.
I understand. Well, but I think if you're responsible for the peace and safety of the community, you try to make decisions where, one, you recognize people's right of freedom of speech and so forth, but you still try to make sure that you don't have any more public confrontation than you can avoid.
Okay, this is just
a tough kind of question. It really is.
Pointedly, that, you know, like I think Lincoln said it, and somebody else may have said it. You can please some of the people some of the time, and all the people some of the time, but you can't please all the people all the time. Nobody is going to agree on one thing all the way.
Well, there's no question. Racism is still a problem in this country.
Okay.
I think that it's important to point out, though, that in the last 20 years, or in the last decade, as you asked, we have black people serving on major boards, United Way, college boards.
Elected officials.
And in the legislature.
And this is something that could not have been possible 10 years ago.
And it is significant to note, too, that since we got blacks in the legislature and blacks in the front, the city has begun to grow. Physically grow. Buildings are popping up. Cranes are over town. And horse racing and lots of things like that. Maybe we'll be dragged kicking and screaming into the 20th century. I don't know. We'll be back in a moment following this. From the Public Library, and former Mayor David Vann have joined us this morning. We're talking about the civil rights movement and the progress that Birmingham and the state of Alabama have made. David, I think you mentioned something during the break there that perhaps we ought to end with today. It was not settled. You said there are still some problems. A lot of folks saying, well, everything, you know, we got a law passed and now everything's all right. But it isn't all right, don't you? It needs a lot more attention.
I've always said the world is like an onion. You work on the problems you see and you take that layer off, and then you find there's a whole other layer of problems that you didn't see because you were busy looking at that other layer. And things like racial problems, we've made tremendous progress. The opening of opportunity in this community for all our people is probably one of the most dramatic stories of any city in the country. But that doesn't mean that you've arrived at a millennium. It's a kind of problem that people have to work on daily. I'm one of the chairmen today of the Community Affairs Committee of ONB, and we meet every Monday morning with business leaders, political leaders, leaders from the black community, and we talk about the effects of these problems and try to find resolutions and prevent problems from occurring. And I think if the city ever stops working on these kinds of problems,
we will go right back. We'll revert.
Well, no, it won't revert, but the problems will get worse. It's not an easy thing to deal with, and I think you have to also not go around and put white hats and black hats on people. I think people whose opinions are formed in legitimate, honest ways have to be respected, and I think this matter of respecting the views of all while you deal with these problems.
That is one of the problems. Stereotyping everybody you see immediately.
You can't do that. If you do, you get in trouble.
All right. Well, it's been an interesting thing. Obviously, we're not going to settle anything here this morning, and but we do appreciate your comments, and we appreciate both of you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Joe Roy is Public Library, and you can still hear some of those programs down there. Today, Odessa Woolfolk at noon, and tomorrow, Judge U.W. Clemon at noon, and Wednesday, Dr. John Nixon from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. We have a dramatic reading of I Have a Dream, and on Thursday, former Mayor David Vann will be talking about the Birmingham settlement, what happened in the settlement between the people who were making the confrontation and the city government. Thank both of you again for being with us. We'll be back in a moment now following this.
We've got news headlines and a weather update right after this.